All right, I'm going to get going. So thank you all again. So today what we're going to cover is really kind of a twofold presentation. One is kind of the importance of Bitcoin payments and the principal benefits of Bitcoin payments. Before I get into that, I'm going to kind of set the table of how I generally think about Bitcoin payments in the order of operations. And then towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk about really Bitcoin payments as a growth strategy, and use that to set the table for Bobby, who's really going to focus on a marketing strategy to really communicate effectively around Bitcoin, but even more broadly, just things you should be thinking about as a business that's operating with Bitcoin and beyond Bitcoin. So with that, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. And one of the things that I always talk about, and I say this for, I know we're going to have people that are hardened Bitcoiners in here, and I expect probably most people are if they're interested in Bitcoin payments. But oftentimes people will they will put the cart before the horse. They will try to go get a local business that doesn't know the first thing about Bitcoin to accept Bitcoin as payment. And I really think that that's the reverse and wrong order of operations, that first people should learn why Bitcoin stores value, and then they should be accepting Bitcoin as payment. Ultimately, I don't think that Bitcoin payments can be logical for a business owner that does not understand Bitcoin. Everything follows in terms of what I will talk about today in terms of the benefits that follow from this idea that Bitcoin is viable as a form of money, and it only works as a form of payment because it is able to store purchasing power over time. And you're really not in a position to see the field or communicate to an audience, particularly your customers, in a way that ultimately incentivizes them to pay you in Bitcoin. Knowing that I'm going to have some people in this room that are not yet well schooled on Bitcoin, I'm going to first explain that in about 2 minutes and then jump directly into why Bitcoin payments. So anybody that's getting to the point of accepting Bitcoin payments, I think, has to understand the problem that Bitcoin solves. So first, Bitcoin is the solution to money printing. The Fed just reduced interest rates by 50 basis points. They manipulate the money supply up and down. It causes havoc. It causes economic distortion. Oftentimes, people can't understand Bitcoin if they don't relate it to a problem. They oftentimes think that it's a solution in search of a problem. In reality, money printing is a massive problem. People have to accept that. Central banks are always going to have to print money. And printing money causes purchasing power to degrade, but it's worse than that. It ultimately causes the currency and the economic system to deteriorate, and that has long-lasting and much more significant consequences. The solution is Bitcoin, and it is a solution to money printing. It is a form of money that can't be printed, and that if Bitcoin cannot credibly enforce its fixed supply, it won't be valuable, but that is the center of everything. There's this fundamental principle that printing money does not create anything, and that's really important to understand. It's that thinking about a money printer just going on loop. If the Fed can do that, produce money at no cost, then it absolutely delivers no value in the economy. And over time, it doesn't actually create more jobs or more workers. It just causes everything in the economy to be worth less. Bitcoin's fundamental value derives from the fact that it has this fixed supply of 21 million. If you do not understand this, then thinking about why you would receive Bitcoin as payment is fundamentally lacking a baseline. All value, in my opinion, in Bitcoin derives from this fixed supply. This happens not by coincidence. There's a lot underneath the hood. And if you're not yet well understood into either why Bitcoin holds value over time or how that happens, Bitcoin payments, in my opinion, really aren't right for you. But Bitcoin has this value because it has this predictable supply. It's known, verifiable. It is finite in supply. It's not susceptible to change. It's not based on trust. No one controls it. That is the basis of Bitcoin as money. It's what drives adoption, and it's what allows Bitcoin to store value over time. And when I relate that now to the problem of payments, think about this in a very logical order. If you did not understand why Bitcoin would store value, then if you have a storefront or you're invoicing your clients or you're performing a show and selling tickets, if you don't have a baseline to understand why, when I take money in today, why it would preserve purchasing power or result in more purchasing power in the future, it's functionally all fugazi. It doesn't make sense. Any assumption that you build on top of quicksand doesn't logically follows. So you really do have to have that foundation. Once you have that foundation, you will now be able to see Bitcoin payments as this very logical extension. If you could understand why buying Bitcoin would make sense, then the idea of accepting it directly for your goods and services makes a lot more sense. So now I'm going to dive into, in my view, what the 8 principal benefits of Bitcoin payments are. First and foremost, I view them across 3 different categories. You're either saving money, you're reducing risk, or you're making money, driving growth. My view is that the foundation of a Bitcoin payment strategy should start with the first 2, reducing risk, saving money. So I'm going to go through this list of 8, and then I'll talk about each one. So first, it creates redundancy to fiat rails. Second, you save on high fiat processing fees, particularly around credit cards. Third, you eliminate costly chargebacks. 4, you protect against the risk of censorship, which is rising. 5, you receive Bitcoin directly from your customer rather than having a single point of failure as an exchange. Not that you shouldn't do that as well, but it ultimately solves a different problem. 6, you benefit from an improvement in privacy in terms of how you receive Bitcoin. 7, you cater your business to customers with sound money. I'll talk about this at length, but this is something that's really strategic that I don't think a lot of people think about. And then 8, you drive growth for your business, and that's where I'll pass it off. So first, I think this is ultimately, for anybody that's considering accepting Bitcoin as payment, I think this is the most important one. This is the most strategic initial reason to do it, which is that it creates a redundancy to fiat rails. My view is, and I think anybody that has gotten to this point, if you understand why Bitcoin stores value, you likely also understand why fiat currency is a risk. And it is a risk because as the Fed and central banks all over the world print money, whatever you've sold, whatever value you've produced is getting debased. It purchases less into the future. So if you've recognized why, from a savings perspective or from a balance sheet perspective, a fiat currency is a risk to you, then the rails of that currency are also logically a risk. And as the fiat currency becomes more fragile, the payment rails become similarly fragile. So accepting Bitcoin payments, too, importantly, it doesn't restrict you from accepting fiat payments in parallel. What it does is enable this dual rail. And what that does for your business is reduce a material risk. I have an image here of a backup generator. Honestly, more people should probably have a backup generator. If the grid fails, having a source of power to power your home for a period of time is really important. Think about Bitcoin payments today as a backup generator, that redundancy in rail to give you access to your customers should anything happen to the reliability of those rails, which are becoming more fragile. It is going to go, though, from that backup engine, that backup generator, to your primary rail. And making that investment early to have it there and available is a foundation to then transfer over to in a larger way over time. I view this as eliminating a long-term risk. I view it as an investment in infrastructure to enable something for your business that can't exist without it. You have the fiat rail, it's there. The costs of it are increasing, which I'll talk about, but going from 0 to 1, having a Bitcoin rail next to a fiat rail enables your business in a way that wouldn't be possible if you didn't have that. And it also trains your customers, not just that you accept Bitcoin as payment, but how to pay you in Bitcoin if their fiat rails ever become unreliable or they become censored. So part of it is enabling it on your side, but long before you actually, one of the ways I think about this is if you wait until you absolutely need Bitcoin for payments, you've waited too long. It's like thinking about if you had to learn how to ride a bike when a bear was chasing you, it would actually be harder to learn how to ride the bike. Some people are going to sink or swim, but being able to already be set up, go through those exercises, train your customers how to do it, possibly educating them long before you ever critically need it, is the right strategy. It's the most defensive strategy. Secondarily, and this is something that's more direct for people. So first one is eliminating a very large risk that you might underweight, but if it were to occur, your business has a critical risk, a risk of ruin. Second is more direct. you save on fiat processing fees. This is what a lot of people come to us as Zaprite to help solve for, that are, again, already understand Bitcoin. Credit card processing fees are typically 3 to 4%. Potentially higher depending on how, quote, at risk your business is. And at risk businesses can be perfectly legal, normal, not really a risk, but frowned upon by the fiat processing system. Business owners should expect that Bitcoin transactions can save between 1% and 2%. That is significant. If somebody has a 10% margin business, 1% savings increases their profit margin by 10%, 2% by 20%. So this is a really key pain point that we talk to a lot of customers about. And the fundamental reason why Bitcoin is able to deliver transactions at low cost, again, it's not no cost. There's cost to infrastructure involved. So don't think about being able to come over and get Bitcoin payments and just have it for free. But there's a fundamental difference between a Bitcoin transaction and a transaction in the fiat system. In the fiat system, a transaction, and functionally all transactions, are credit-based. They are inherently trust-based because the system is one that's actually not built on a form of money that has inherent monetary properties. The fiat money can just be printed. So the only way to facilitate payments is one counterparty to the other. So you inherently have to have counterparty risk involved, and it has to inherently be a trusted system. Does this person have the money that they say they have? Okay, yes, I'll settle later. So all fiat transactions are settled at a point after the actual transaction, whether it's 6 hours later, 24 hours later. It's just not happening at the actual point of sale. And when you think about this, in Bitcoin, all Bitcoin transactions are fully funded. It's not a check to see if they have a balance and wait for settlement later. It's actually funded at the time of purchase, or at least it can be. And that sets the table for why the actual transaction itself can be fundamentally cheaper, because you don't have to insert practically 2 to 3 at minimum counterparties in between and have it be a trust-based transaction. You can have it be a trustless transaction. This is another one that we talk to a lot with customers that come through. Bitcoin transactions, for that reason, that they're fully funded, I can pay you in a way that you can't get my money back out of my account, eliminates costly chargebacks. I do envision that there's going to be a world where processing comes into Bitcoin, where if you want that as an option for your customers, that you can have that, but it doesn't have to be there by default like it is in the fiat system if you're paying digitally. Once the Bitcoin is made, you can facilitate a refund to your customers, but it's the balance of power shifts to the merchant, and that's incredibly valuable. Also something to think about. As inflation rises in the fiat system, the risk of chargeback increases because somebody is now paying more money than either they knew they were paying or that they're just struggling to get by. So there's a greater likelihood that they charge back. So this image on the right shows that 74% of merchants reported an increase in 2023 of chargebacks, and the average merchant reported, so of those 74, that chargebacks had increased 20%. The cost of this, and I've talked with customers who, particularly if they have cross-border customers where money just disappears from their bank account, they don't know who took it out or what the charge was. It just unilaterally is gone. If you're paid in Bitcoin, it doesn't put you in a position where you can't refund customers. It's just your choice, and that is powerful for the merchant. 4, protecting against the risk of censorship. What I have here on the right, I think, is something that most people are probably familiar with, but some Canadian truckers protest in Canada, and suddenly not only were they cut off from their bank accounts without due process, but people that just donated to their effort without due process were cut off from their bank account. Increasingly, people are seeing this centralized system have these choke points, not just in not being able to get a bank account, but suddenly getting your bank account canceled. And that it's happening to normal people. And even if a merchant is sitting out there saying it's not going to happen to me, they have to be honest and recognize that the risk is rising. And even if it's a small probability, even if it's a 1% or 2% risk that you lose your fiat rail, which ultimately, when you understand the fiat system, there's a lot of fintech companies that sit on top, but there's one bank on one side and a second bank on the other side, and the banks are the ultimate rails. And the censorship of this system, the fiat system, increases over time for the reason that it centralizes over time. The less competition that there is, the less disincentive there is to censor, and the more that the system itself can be weaponized. So thinking about recognizing that if you are only in this system where you can only accept fiat currencies from your customers, and regardless of who you are, you might say something on social media, like in the UK, and then be deplatformed, right? So it's about recognizing that the world is fragile, the fiat system is fragile. If you are a successful business owner, you've understood that it takes a lot to do that, and you have a lot at risk. And if you have a critical systemic failure point, then eliminating that risk provides you with a benefit. Fifth, receiving Bitcoin directly from customers. I think about this as diversifying liquidity. And accepting Bitcoin from your customers is fundamentally different than earning fiat and converting fiat to Bitcoin. On the top here, I showed that process. You basically start with the buyer's dollars at a buyer's bank, going through a payment processor to the merchant bank. The merchant gets dollars, then you go to a Bitcoin exchange and you get merchant Bitcoin. Those are great services. I use them every day, albeit I use them less because virtually all of my savings is in Bitcoin, so I don't have a lot of fiat to buy Bitcoin. But more to the point, that if you can have direct access to your customers to allow them to pay you directly, it does two things for you. One, it creates that channel so you have direct access to your customers. Direct access to your customers itself diversifies liquidity, but you also now have this other redundancy as a way to get Bitcoin. So it's not one of these situations where it's one or the other. It is that you should do both, and it's very powerful being able to be in a position where you can access your customers directly, but also that they can access you directly. It also happens to be the cheapest way. Sixth, the benefit of improvement in privacy. People oftentimes worry about privacy in Bitcoin in terms of working with a regulated financial institution and their reporting obligations. I'm personally somebody that worries about that less. I think that Bitcoin is going to change people a lot more than people are going to change Bitcoin. And that as more people understand Bitcoin, more people are going to value privacy and push back on the surveillance state. And not that the surveillance state in this draconian way, it's just that functionally all of our transactions are reported to the government or can be requested from a bank. The best way to improve your privacy in Bitcoin, in my view, is, while I'm not supportive of things like coin joins, the best way to increase your privacy in Bitcoin is to be able to receive Bitcoin in a way where only you and your customer need to know about it. And there's nothing illicit and illegal about that. You can be running a flower shop or, offering legal services or, having a dry cleaner. It doesn't matter. That you can put yourself in a position, if your customer is actually directly paying you in Bitcoin, that only you and your customer really need to know about that. And even if it's not just you and your customer, you're relying on a third party to provide some piece of infrastructure, if they don't have reporting obligations because they're not actually helping you transmit money, then you are similarly in a position of increased privacy. A Bitcoin transaction, for the reason that it's fully funded between wallet to wallet, it is, while it's not yet at that point of as private as a physical cash transaction, it's a lot more like a physical cash transaction than it is a digital credit card transaction. The transaction that Trump facilitated yesterday at PubKey was done over the Lightning Network, and really only, that transaction's not on chain. Only the parties that were actually a party to the transaction know actually the details of it. And that's valuable to you as a fundamental right. 7, and this is where we start to get into some larger strategic reasons to accept Bitcoin. Catering your business to customers with sound money is ultimately a necessity to the viability of your business. What I have here and it's not to make light of hyperinflation or what's going on in Venezuela or places like Turkey, and now it seems like Argentina's turned a corner, which is great. But think about this, that what happens in hyperinflation, or even if you don't consider the level of inflation that's happening today, you can accept that it's real and that it's painful, and that you're oftentimes as a business owner being put in a position of, do I need to increase my prices? Or whether you're increasing prices or not, if the food at the grocery store and the gas at the gas station is going up, your customers, if they're only living in a fiat world, are functionally suffocating. And two, they're getting bled out in the streets and they're going to run out of money. And you can't live in a world where your customers run out of money. You need customers that have sound money, and your best bet to be able to continue to have customers to buy products from you is to cater your business to customers with sound money. What this cartoon shows on the right is basically somebody that shows up with a large amount of fiat to buy a bunch of toilet paper, and he walks away with only a single roll of toilet paper. Think about that as, do your customers and will your customers continue to have purchasing power to continue to buy your products? If you don't have customers that have sound money, or if you continue to increase prices and you just have customers that have fiat, eventually you price your customers out and it's not sustainable as a business. So the sooner that you can cater and craft your business, both from what the actual services you are delivering, as well as your message to customers, to an audience that has this beautiful sound money that's increasing in purchasing power over time, that is one of the most strategic and less understood reasons about why you should accept Bitcoin. And then the eighth reason is to drive growth for your business. For the customers who I've seen be most successful in this, is it's not just about turning on Bitcoin and saying that I accept Bitcoin as payment as a gimmick. It's about developing an entire strategy around it. And this also comes full circle to why I think it's really important to get the order of operations first. First, understand why Bitcoin stores value. If you don't, go grab the Bitcoin Standard, my book, Gradually Then Suddenly, read about that. If you do understand why Bitcoin stores value, it's not just about flicking the switch on, it's about actively engaging in that strategy. And that the businesses that benefit most in the near term, in the future when Bitcoin is just money, everyone's going to be accepting it. It's going to be ubiquitous. There's not this, grand benefit to gain relative to your competition in that future world where Bitcoin's the unit of account and it's just facilitating 99.9% of all transactions. But in this day and age, it is the single easiest, greatest way, if you are a Bitcoiner, to differentiate your way to your audience, to say that it's not just about creating the opportunity for your customer to pay you. It's about communicating values alignment. It's about communicating that you as a business owner share their values. And if there's a universe of people that will change their behavior, it is Bitcoiners. And so if I think about this from a perspective of, you could be in any commodity business, and it doesn't have to be a commodity business, but think about a landscaper. I'm in Austin. If there was a landscaper that said, I'm accepting Bitcoin, but not just that, I'm a Bitcoiner, then a bunch of people are going to seek that person out. And in a world that has become largely commoditized, you have Bitcoiners everywhere, and you can put a marketing message out to allow you to reach more people efficiently than you otherwise could. But again, it only works if you can be authentic, and it only works if you understand Bitcoin. If you try to gimmick your way through, Bitcoiners will tell that you do not understand the medium or the message, and they will not buy from you. It's not something that comes cheaply. Loyalty doesn't. But again, if you already do share their values, then you are missing a growth opportunity by not appealing to the market of Bitcoin holders.